whoever's publishing it, or maybe it's getting imported. Maybe it's getting imported.
So it's imported.
It's imported, which is why it's.
Using expensive in the United States too. So it's
what is it in how much?
So the list price is $30.
So with purchase parity, it should
Amazon
be.
is 24. But I think in about a year it's going to come out in a paperback.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't control it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Book came out in which year?
Last year.
But there is a Kindle version, and
yes,
so
it's very
and it's affordable. Yeah.
It's a very well written book. Thank you.
How many of you read it?
I read parts of
50, 60.
Authors to be able to autograph Kindle versions. You need to suggest that to Amazon. And then you can perhaps mark up the price a little bit more, so they make a little more money too.
Just one step away from being an NFT.
The other problem is, right? Then I'm gonna have to do it. Like I'll be getting this thousands of emails a day.
But he just told you what
no,
to
you
do.
just once.
Digital.
Just
you can get
do it
Anna
once.
To do it and pay her to do it for you. So I think you'll be fine.
She's unaffordable.
That's a good one.
Yes, you just call me priceless.
Priceless.
What I want to ask you, I see so many of your posts you send me on your Western classical music. Do you play any musical instrument?
No, not at all.
And how do you get time to hear all this music? You send me so much list of playlists and all. I mean,
that's
together with your work?
It's not work for me, right? I love it. I love
so
it.
So you do both together? You learn the music and...
No. So number one, when I write in the morning, I always listen to always listen to classical music.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, I use Spotify, and Spotify, like after learns what I like to listen, it starts suggesting music, and once in a while something touches me, like it's new music to me, and I explore it, and I study about the composer, I study about this piece of music, and then I write about it. So if I listen at least 2 hours a day to music, then remember, it's not work. It's not not nice thing about music. I can be listening to music while doing something else.
But your classical music interest in classical music is from a very long time, or just now recently when you were?
I've been listening.
From the time you were in Russia. Excuse me. So you are listening in West from a long time, from the time you were in Russia.
So I listened to classical music since my parents listened to classical music, so I listened to it from relatively young age, but in Russia, records were expensive, like I'm sure, just like in India, and so I knew a little bit about it, and when I came to the United States in my 20s, I was able to buy CDs relatively cheaply. Like Best Buy would sell CDs for $1.99, and usually there were performances from like some Eastern European orchestras, and this is how kind of I got to learn more about it and listen, but in the first phase of that I was just listening. Is that when I started writing about it, I actually learned more about the composers. I listened to lectures, read books about it, this kind of stuff. So that came later. That came only because I started writing about it. Which, and the more you write about it, the more interesting it got to me. So the more I read about it, and so on.
I sent you a mail of a person who's written a very good book on Western classical music. He's from here only in India, and he has started to learn how to play the piano at 75 years old.
Really?
I got his book here, I'll show you up.
Oh,
it's a wonderful book it is.
So it's very interesting. You said Western classical music.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is Eastern classical music.
No. Here in India, it's classical music means Karnataka classical music or Hindustani classical music. Therefore, I specifically mentioned Western classical.
No, it's
West of India.
Did you watch playlist on Netflix?
Sorry?
I said, since you're talking about Spotify, did you watch the playlist? That's a series on
Spotify.
Netflix, on Spotify.
No.
It's the origination story of Spotify.
I'm sorry.
Netflix.
There was a Netflix story. What's the name of the story?
Playlist.
Oh, the
I think
playlist.
they finished season 1.
Oh, is it about Spotify?
Yeah.
Oh, is it good?
It's very good.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
So they've kind of shown it from a different perspective, from a coder perspective, from an investor, from the founder, from a lawyer.
Very well told, sir.
Oh, I know that it's I know kind of it started in Sweden because
Yes.
nobody cared.
Yeah.
I know I kind of know the story, but it's called The Playlist. Okay. I didn't know about it.
But
Yeah.
talk about active value. How long what is your time period? 10 years, 15 years, 1 year, 2 years. What is the time period of holding stocks for your own portfolio management company? Having a portfolio management service.
So like when we buy companies,
Average period time.
Okay, I'll give you 2 time periods: 4 and forever.
Whatever.
No. And both. Because so when the problem is you can't put forever into a model. Okay. So what we do when we buy companies, we do kind of we try to figure out what it's worth, but what it's worth we do it in 4 years out. Why? There is value in growth.
Yes.
Okay, so let's say you have 2 companies. One is not growing earnings, and one is growing earnings. If I value both of them on current earnings, the growth company most likely going to appear to be expensive, and the company not growing earnings appear to be cheap. Now, that ignores the value that the earnings
generate.
Yeah, exactly. So now, if I value both companies, figure out what they're worth 4 years out, and then discount it back, what happens is this: if this company that's not growing earnings, actually its earning, the companies will be worth less, right? Because the earnings are not growing. Therefore, if let's say the earnings today are $1, and the same earnings going to be done 4 years from now, so that the dollar of earnings discounted back is going to be working now 70 cents or 60 cents. So actually, now the other company, the growing company, if they're earning today $1, but in 4 years they'll be earning $3 or whatever, $2, whatever that number is, discounted back, it's going to be more than $1. So now this is how I introduce both companies, the companies that are growing earnings, like equalize basically company growing earnings and not growing earnings. That's but my expectation, I would like to own these companies for a long time. Forever is kind of sounds ridiculous.
There's a book, Expectation Investing. Michael Marbosson and Arthur Rappaport, they do the reverse DCF. But you see Jeff Bezos' company Amazon, if you look at it, if you take this strategy of growth quarter, that's a very myopic strategy, I feel, because see, as a human being, we fall sick. Even a company may have a bad quarter or 1 or 2 quarters. You must look at the big picture. That is what I feel. Now, if you look at Jeff Bezos' company, Amazon, at one time there was a loss. It was a huge loss, and the stock price of the Amazon company had gone to practically nothing. So, if you had to take a myopic view and see this quarter, that quarter, is not worth. That's what I believe in. That's what my philosophy is.
Yeah. So a couple things. Jeff Bezos has this great quote, which I use in my company all the time. So he was on a conference call, and somebody says, "Jeff, this was a great quarter," and he said, "To be honest, the seeds of this quarter was planted years ago."
Yeah.
And I think, and by the way, like in my firm, we do the same thing. We know that whatever actions we make today, we're not going to see the fruits for years and years. So that's, by the way, that's true to how we treat our clients, about investment decisions we make, etc. And so I agree with you that looking at quarterly numbers, they a lot of times they give you noise. Sometimes they give you information, but not all the time. That's kind of that's.
Seth Klarman says, whatever profit you make at the time of purchase, at the point of planting, not at the time of selling, at the time when you harvest the crop, at the point of purchase is the time of profit. And Nick Sleep, a very big fund manager of UK, he had only 3 companies: Costco, Amazon, another one company. 3 companies in his portfolio.
Berkshire.
Berkshire,
You
yes.
know what? Actually, let me. I'm gonna flip this a little bit because I think this is very dangerous. Let me explain it. Let me explain it.
Concentration.
Yeah, because I would argue Amazon hurt investors a lot more than helped them. Like, I'm not talking about investors who invest in Amazon, but investors who invest in other companies that look like Amazon.
Okay.
Because for every Amazon, there's hundreds and hundreds of companies that die. So I would be very careful to try to draw all my lessons on Amazon, because this is how you're gonna. Amazon is a mutant. It's a company that comes every 100. There are very few of them, and your ability to identify them, it's so clear in hindsight, but at that time is incredibly difficult. So there were some other questions. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Not on investing yet. First of all, it's wonderful to see you in person. I've been reading your emails for years now. I wanted to ask you about
Hen is a little bit loud. Sorry. Go
like
ahead.
your book, more on the philosophy. I
What's your name?
my name is Vikram. Vikram Ajmi.
Big Eye.
Hi. I wanted to ask about America today. Land of opportunity for you it was. But whether the average kid in America who didn't grow up in Soviet Russia, maybe an underprivileged family at the time, or there weren't any in Soviet Russia, but had exposure to chess, to classical music, to classical art, and got transplanted to the land of opportunity. But whether kids growing up in America today, maybe average, are getting those same kind of classical, educational, and mind-expanding benefits or not, and what does that do for the outlook of the United States?
Well, so the couple things. So a lot of times, people look at me as me being from Russia. I've been disadvantaged. Like the fact that I came to the United States from Russia, I was an immigrant. A lot of times, people assume that was a disadvantage for me, and I would argue I was disadvantaged maybe for a year or two, but then it became a huge advantage. Just like you take anybody from this room and put them in the United States, and you're going to do so much better than the average American who was born there. Just because you see the contrast. You see where you're coming from or where you can achieve. And you don't take it for granted. So I feel like I'm privileged. Like I'm lucky that I was born in Russia and raised in America. And I always try to instill this in my kids. And so here's the irony of this. Like you come to this country that your next generation would do better than you, but realizing that it's a blessing and a curse for her, right? Because she's not exposed to the to what I went through, to this kind of experience. So everybody in this room is going through on one side, but on the other side, as a parent, I try to expose her to that. And by the way, this is why this trip to India, seriously, is so important for her to see how fortunate she is. It's very difficult for me to speak for average American, but average American does not listen as much to classical music, and you know what? And there is nothing wrong with that. It's kind of funny. There is this program. My kids went to this after-school program called Kuman. I don't know if you guys have it in India or not. It's a like if you want your kids to be better, like to have supplemental education in math and reading, you take them to the program after school. And there's not a single kid there who was born in the United States, whose parents were born in the United States. It's the Indians or America or Chinese, yes,
Chinese.
Or maybe a few Russians.
Yeah.
And that tells you actually kind of a lot.
By the way, I just read this morning, India has the second largest number of grandmasters after Russia today.
In chess?
In chess. Second largest.
It's kind of, you're behind because Cheskin was born here, so it's.
Yeah. Good one. We are catching up. We are catching up. Give us another decade.
But anyway, to answer your question, there is a cycle to everything, and the abundance is not necessarily a good thing. I just wrote this essay, so in the next version of this book, in the paperback version, I'm gonna have a few new essays. And by the way, if you email bonus@solonigate.net and just send a copy of whatever of your Kindle version or whatever, that your Kindle receipt, you get new chapters I wrote since the book came out. And there is this essay there where I talk about the value of scarcity. Okay, so this is it's actually so much easier for me to have this conversation in this crowd because you guys you have a very similar experience of growing up in a lot of scarcity.
Yep.
Okay, when I talk about scarcity in the United States, people don't get it, but everybody here went through you went through times where you could not afford to buy food. You went through times where there was no food in the store. Okay, and we usually look at scarcity as a negative thing, and I would argue that there is a value in this. Number one, and I would argue that we look at abundance as a just positive, and I would argue there is a negative side to abundance. Okay, and I don't know if I think this will actually click with you guys. The first time I had Pepsi, when I was 16 years old in Russia, and it was a magical experience. It was hot outside, and I remember that that day, I remember the day for the rest of my life because it was just a magical drink. Okay, and then I came to the United States and I realized you can buy Pepsi in gallons, literally. It's almost as cheap as water. And so over the next 3 years, I consumed more Pepsi. I made up for my lack of consumption in the previous 18 years. And I remember sitting at a restaurant, at a Village Inn restaurant, and I was on the third or fourth refill of Coke, Coke or Pepsi. And I realized when I'm drinking it, I can't taste it. It tastes like water. And at that point, I told myself, I'm done. So I'm going to drink Pepsi or Coke only on high occasions. And for me, high occasions actually, for the most part, when I go see a movie, which is 3 or 4 times a year. So my kids never saw me order Coke or Pepsi in a restaurant because I never do. So I just, only when I go see a movie. And every single time I drink that soda, the magic is there. So my point is, when we have abundance, it's actually the negative side of that. It makes us makes us not to appreciate what we have. And a lot of times we have to actually infuse some scarcity into our life just to appreciate things. So that's the paradox of that, right? Yeah.
You have written this.
Yeah, and so a couple things I do, for instance, when I'm in Denver, I don't eat desserts. I don't eat red meat. I don't eat any kind of pasta or bread, etc. But when I travel, I do. And when I travel, I appreciate all these things a lot more. On Thursdays, when I'm in Denver, I fast. It's arbitrary. There's absolutely there's nothing magic about Thursdays. It's just I chose one day a week I'll fast, I do this kind of things, and I think we need to, the wealthier we become as a society or as individually, we need to infuse some amount of scarcity. Another example is. When we moved to the United States, I realized you can actually buy literally a gallon drum of ice cream. And when I realized, and it was very cheap. So the first week it was magic. Third week, I was like, okay. 6 weeks later or 6 months later, I was just basically just eating ice, with sugar. So now when I have ice cream, actually, I have it on a few occasions, but I appreciate it so much more. So anyway, I'm not sure what the question was. Oh, but that's it. No, but anyway, so this me being exposed to scarcity in Russia makes me appreciate things more.
The question is,